Welcome back to Quince in the Evening here on WSJU Radio, and joining us now on the Coco Shack Hotline, as promised, is Chris Botta. Chris, thank you for taking the time out of your day to join us.
Hey, Quinn, Vince, Tommy, how are you guys, all right?
Great, Chris. Thanks for having you on.
Hey, I enjoyed it. Anything you guys want to talk about, bring it on.
We would love to talk about NHL hockey, and since Tom was so gracious enough to set this interview up, I'll give you the first question there, Tom.
All right, so, Chris, what do you think of the Islanders' play so far this year?
I think it's kind of, what we expected, right? I mean, I thought they'd be 500 at this point in the season, so they're 2 games below. As much as we might project them being a 500 team, they never get there the way you would think, because that's how unexpected the NHL season is, and that would be the case for just about every team in the league, from the good ones to the bad ones. They got 3 points in these last 2 games, but it wasn't that impressive to me. I put a lot of emphasis, especially in this short season, in facing teams on back-to-back nights. In fact, I don't know if you know, but I had tweeted something to the effect of that if they didn't get 4 points in those 2 games, playing Toronto, who had played a boatload of games and played the night before, and in Ottawa, I mean, the Islanders played Thursday night, and they sat there and waited as Ottawa played Saturday afternoon against a pretty bruising Flyers team, and they won in the skills competition, as Howie Rose calls it. So there's some disappointments there. There's some underachieving there. But if you were to say that they'd get almost nothing from Kyle Oposo, not a lot from Grabner. I know he's got 8 or 9 goals, which is pretty significant, but he's not producing as much as he should. And you could say the same thing for a few other guys. The bottom line, guys, is they're still in the mix. So I don't think anybody should have too many complaints, but you'd like to see them take that next step one of these years.
Chris, John Tavares was the first overall pick a few years ago, and now he's tied for 7th in the league in points so far this season. Is he finally becoming the player that the Islanders hoped he would?
Yeah, and I think we saw that last year, too. I understand that in his rookie year, there were some flags raised. Ooh, what about his skating? How come he tends to get knocked down pretty easily, or sometimes even just fall down easily? But even in those years, I remember he had that run. Remember, it culminated with that game in Vancouver where he had 4 or 5 points and looked dominant. He's terrific, but beyond how good he is, and he is absolutely a top 10 player in this league. When I say top 10 player, I don't just mean forwards. I include defensemen and goalie, and I would put John somewhere in that top 10. We could debate where he would be. But more important than that, and something I wouldn't expect people outside of New York or maybe even what we call Islanders country to realize, the big thing about Tavares is really about the man that he has become. I mean, his commitment to this franchise at a time when it was going through so much, and continues to, but at least there's some certainty there with Brooklyn. For him to do that, to sign long-term when he still had a year left, knowing that his agent, who it's his job to point out why he should or maybe shouldn't do it, for him to do that anyway and to continue to stand by this franchise through some pretty dark days when he, could write his own ticket a few years from now is just incredibly impressive. And so he's a self-made person, and I'd like to think as a parent that you credit your parents for that and his upbringing. I know his uncles played a big role, and also he's he's all right. Maybe he's not a self-made player. He certainly was blessed with some gifts, but the things that he was not great at, he continues to work at, and I'm really really impressed by John and what he's become.
So, Chris, I have a two-pronged question for you, because prior to the season, I thought that the Islanders were going to be that 8th seed in the East. Right now, they stand a little behind that. Do you think that they're going to be able to get into the playoffs this season? And if so, or if not, will it be because of? Do they need to make a trade, or what kind of trade would they need to make that a reality?
They listen. They need to make some moves to get better, but that said, they're 3 points out, and I guess this is a good news, bad news thing, okay? They're in the mix, right? But here's the thing, they're healthy, and that's good. I understand that Strait became a nice player for them, but I still think you have to look at him as a third-pairing guy, even if he might have been on the top 2 pairings for the Islanders, with Brian Strait I'm talking about here, so there's no confusion with Mark Strait. They're a healthy team. They're playing teams on most nights that have significant injuries, and you wake up this morning, and I understand you and I could probably score on Josie Theodore on some nights, but it's still a loss to the Panthers that they lose this guy. Markstrom could turn out could turn out to kind of be a blessing. Excuse my choice of word there, but Markstrom's a terrific prospect. So maybe if they just give him the games, Florida can go on a bit of a miracle run here. But teams got a lot of problems here. Tampa Bay's got a lot of flaws. Buffalo's had injuries. Washington, a lot of problems. It just goes on and on. So they can do it. Would I like to see them address a need and make a move? Sure. Yeah, but in defense of Garth, I'd like to think every GM. I saw somebody tweet about Tampa today. I think it was the Tampa Rays thing. In Edmonton, they both just need that big power forward. Well, okay, name them. Where are you getting them from? So in Garth's defense, I understand it isn't that easy. But yeah, you would like to see them. Why not wait? Why wait until the trade deadline? Can you add a piece that might be able to help push you over the top? To answer your question, I thought before the season started they would be in the mix for the 8th spot, but I thought they'd come up short. Now, if they stay healthy, even with the sometimes lackluster play they've had and big, holes in the games of some of their top players that we expected a lot more of, they should be in the mix because who's going to run with it? We know, Montreal probably. Pittsburgh's definitely in there. Boston's there. Philadelphia, I still believe in because I know they'll spend the money no matter where they have to find it. But there's still plenty of spots open. So, yes, the Islanders should be in the mix. I expect they'll be there in April.
Chris, it's a pretty big understatement that the Rangers have really underachieved, especially in terms of the fans' expectations for this season after their success last year. What's the biggest difference with the Rangers as opposed to last season?
Yeah, call me an excuse maker. I have no reason to stand up for the Rangers. I did enjoy covering them last year for the Times. I'll say for the record that they were good to me, and their PR department was good to me, but I certainly have no emotional ties there. So I'll say this at all risk. Listen, they are not a deep team. They are very high end, not just with the obvious with Nash and Richards and the big money guys, but of course with the three main defensemen. And sooner or later, one of those guys is going to, and they have already gotten in the way of a shot, that's how Coach Tortorella tells them to do, and they're going to miss some time. And, Callahan got lucky with the shoulder, which looked like it could have been serious. Girardi and Stahl and McDonough have all had injuries that if we had woken up in the next morning and the tweet from the Rangers said they were out 4 to 6 weeks, we wouldn't have been surprised. So they're kind of getting fortunate here. Why have they gotten off to a slow start? Nash, which I thought would be a problem. I like the trade, don't get me wrong, but I thought with no training camp, working in a new guy in that system, I thought was going to present challenges as opposed to knowing what you had with Anisimov and Dubinsky and everything. So I think that's going to take time. That guy needs to finish. Nash is a great player, but I don't want to compare him to Grabner here, but for a guy who creates as many chances as him, he doesn't finish, or at least this year he hasn't finished as well. But they need to stay healthy. I'm telling you right now, if those core three defensemen only miss between the three of them, 5 games or fewer the rest of the way, and where they got about 28 games left, the Rangers are going to make the playoffs. And I think this year, guys, you just need to get in there. Same thing for Philly. Yeah, same thing for the Islanders, too. Just make the playoffs. I don't think anybody's going to be too worried about seedings this spring.
Chris, for all the Rangers' struggles this year, do you think that any of it could play into the fact that maybe this Rangers team overachieved last year and they're maybe coming back down to earth, or teams are figuring them out? Or do you just think that they're in a bit of a rut right now?
I guess there's a little of that. It's hard for me to label them as overachievers because, and this is coming from somebody who worked for 20 years for a franchise that was always in the lower margins of the salary. I think anytime you have a salary range that puts you near the cap or at the cap, your expectations should be high. I thought Tortorella did a good job. Now the question is what Tortorella brings, and you could say this for a lot of the great coaches in the league, and I'd put my friend Peter Laviolette in that category too. There comes a point where their magic, runs out. They ask you to play a certain way, which is really hard. In summary, or in Tortorella's defense, recklessly throw your body in front of anything, and sometimes that could have an expiration date. So I don't think they expired. I don't think that they overachieved. I would have thought that they would have made the conference finals. I picked them to win the first 2 series, but I also picked them to beat Jersey. So I can't say that they overachieved. I do think there's a lot of it has to do with Nash and losing guys, and also those depth guys. Okay, sometimes that could be a little bit overrated, but they knew what they had in Prust, who's a very, very good bottom six forward. And then you're dabbling with a guy like Asham, who's a friend of mine going back to the Islanders. And but he is a true journeyman. He's played for every team in this division and every team in the area. And those guys kind of come and go, and Halpern, and they're all doing okay. But they had a nice mix there, and you don't just throw them on the ice. If they had started in October, they probably would have started slowly too. But they had 82 games to get over. This time they only have 48. So I think in the end they're going to be there. They would be one of 5 or 6 teams that I would say will make the playoffs as long as they stay healthy.
Now, Chris, about Travis Hamonic and Andrew McDonald, the 2 top defensemen, in my opinion, for the Islanders, what has happened to them this year? I mean, they've looked bad at times and even worse at others.
Let's take one at a time, even though I know that they're playing together. Andrew McDonald is a personal favorite of mine. I think probably anybody who's been around that team at all in the last couple of years. And yes, it's been well documented. I haven't been personally around them the last 2 years or so. You talk about an overachiever. This is a guy who the Islanders drafted in the 6th round 6-7 years ago, solely on the advice of Teddy Nolan, who begged the scouts to use a pick on this defenseman, this really skinny defenseman with a great head on his shoulders, who played for him in junior hockey at Moncton, if I recall correctly. And they did it, and he has just self-made himself into this, very steady guy. Now, here's where the problem is, and it happens with the Islanders a lot, and it does happen with other teams. You get a guy, and he's good, and he gets to be very good, but still he has his weaknesses. And in Andrew's case, it's the fact that he's never going to be a big, strong, bruising defenseman. And now, because of injuries, because of lack of depth, last time I checked, he was averaging something like 23 minutes and 25 seconds. I think it might be down over the last couple of games, but he was around there. That's too much. He's in my mind, Andrew is a very good number 5 defenseman, but they're asking him to be a 3. Travis Hamonic, who's going to be very, very good, I think he's kind of in that category too, where in a perfect world he's playing 18, 20 minutes a game and playing them really well, and they're asking him to do too much. So it's just the nature of the way things are at the Islanders when you're around the cap floor, when you're asking a lot of young kids. They're both good players. I'm not concerned about them long term. I'm a little bit concerned because I think McDonald's up for a contract, right? He's been playing on a really inexpensive one-way deal that he signed a couple of years ago. So he's due for a contract soon, and I'd like to see him do really well for himself because, like I said, he's a personal favorite of mine. Hamonic, also keep in mind, he got a concussion when he was in Bridgeport during the lockout, and it wasn't reported much because, let's face it, the coverage during the lockout, there wasn't much of it, to the point where he even went home to the Winnipeg area to rest and stayed off the ice for a while. You don't just come back from a concussion, play a couple of games in Bridgeport, or have a week-long training camp and be the same. So sounds like I might be making excuses for the guys, but I just think a little too much is being asked for them. Long-term, would I be concerned? No. Next year, if I got rich and owned a team or bought my way into being general manager of a team, would I love to have those guys on my team? Absolutely. So I'm not too concerned with them long-term.
We're talking with Chris Botta, writer for the Sports Business Journal. Chris, Chicago Blackhawks through 22 games. They haven't lost a game in regulation. Is there any team that's anywhere close to them in terms of quality, and are they the odds-on favorite to win the Cup this year?
They are a contender for the Cup. Right now, yeah, they'd be right up there. The biggest concern, and I'm sure everybody there has it too, is that this is a league where you talk about peaking when the time is right. I'll go back to 03, 04-ish, give or take a year. I'm bad with years. Tampa Bay Lightning, the year they won the Cup, including beating the Islanders, the team that I worked for in the first round, they were the team that was playing the best in April, and they carried it to May and June. And now, the last time we had a season, the LA Kings, they were the best team in April, and they carried it to May and June. Chicago's still got a ways to go to keep this going. I would have to believe that deep down, he would never say this publicly, but Stan Bowman can't wait for this team to lose a game. And if he had his way, he'd probably prefer it with 6-0 to a rival, just to kind of end this, to humble his team, the humblest coaching staff, who I'm sure he can't say anything to right now. But once again, to answer your question, they're the best team in the league right now. But I won't say they are the odds-on favorite to win the Stanley Cup, because not only does it have to be more games played, there's just more time. And, yeah, injuries creep into this, too. So, I'll put them in a mix with 4 or 5 other teams. I wouldn't put money on them right now because, let's face it, the odds you're going to get aren't good. But they're a great team. And, they've become kind of mandatory must-see TV. When they're on, I seek them out.
Chris, before we let you go, I would be remiss not to ask you about the Boston Bruins, my favorite team. Boston, I think there's been some rumors floating around Boston about some interest in Jarome Iginla. Do you think that the Bruins are going to make a move before the trade deadline, or are they going to just try to stand pat and go with pretty much the core of the Stanley Cup team a few years ago?
I guarantee you that they will make a move. What I can't guarantee you is who's that going to be. The reason why I guarantee it is because they now have the cap space in large part, actually, because of the unique Tim Thomas trade with the Islanders, which was helpful for flexibility reasons for both teams. Peter Chiarelli, he's a guy who he acts. He takes care of business. He'll do it quietly. Guys like Ryder, who were rumored have already been traded, doesn't mean they can't be traded again, but I don't see them dealing with Montreal. He will address his needs. Will it be a blockbuster? No, probably not, because you think about the blockbusters at the trade deadline, they rarely actually, same thing with July 1 free agent signings, they rarely become the thing that put a team over the top. They help, no doubt, but they'll do something because Boston has the flexibility to do it, and they are a legitimate contender. And if I could just throw in a word for our old friend Zdeno Chara, the guy deserves every penny he's getting. He plays. He's the equivalent of having 2 really good defensemen on your team. He chews up minutes. He plays in all roles. As long as he's healthy, I absolutely put the Bruins in the mix with Chicago as a top contender.
Well, one of the costly things that cost the Bruins yesterday was when he had to sit out for 17 minutes after defending Sagan, who got it looked like cross-checked in the neutral zone.
Yep.
And so he ended up just seeking out that player, knocking him down, and got into a fight with him right after that against Montreal. So.
And you know what? It was for one night, especially Boston. Last I checked, they were still behind everybody else in games played. I know it was Montreal and it's a rival, but I think they're down to, they've only played like 19, where most other teams, I think the Islanders are up to 22, 23. If they lost that game because of that, so be it. But yeah, in a very unique way, he showed his value by what happens when he's not on the ice. He makes everybody better. I'm fans of all those other guys on their D, but he just makes everybody better. And what a treat it's been to watch him develop.
Hey Chris, one more before we let you go. What was the biggest? What is the biggest surprise from the Islanders so far this season? Is it the way Brad Boyes has gelled in with John Tavares and Matt Molson, or is it the way that Lubomir Wisnowski has joined in the team and just made it seem like he never really left to begin with, like he was always there?
For pleasant surprises, I mean, they'd be right up there. I'm actually not ready to say that Boyes has stepped in seamlessly. We could argue the PA Parento thing till the cows come home or till the end of your show, but it would have been the end of the world if they got both guys. I mean, I understand Boyes has made up for his production, but is there a reason why they couldn't keep one and also sign the other guy, especially since they were able to get him for $1 million? That's a bit of a disappointment, but Boyes has been good, and I don't think it's been a big surprise, though. I think most people in the league, we know how he did the last couple of years, but Doug Weight knew him well, and given the right opportunity, you're playing on that line. You're gonna get your point. So he's been good. I have been impressed by Wisnowski. I've maybe seen half of his games on TV. It is impressive that he stepped right in. I'm trying to think of other surprises for you too. I mean, in a way, that's the reason for optimism for Islander fans. If you want to have some, it's that there hasn't been really super great overachievement. Tavares has taken the next step, and they've stayed healthy. And the goaltending's been pretty good by Nabokov, but there hasn't been that real breakout yet. So to me, that would be reason to think that they could, maybe get in this 8th spot if they could find some consistency and stay healthy, Tom.
Chris, thank you so much for joining us. We hope that you enjoy your time here on Wednesday. You're going to be in a journalism class,
Yeah, small world. It just hit me tonight that my friend Lynn Zinzer, who's a writer and editor at the New York Times, she teaches a sports writing class at St. John's. It's a marathon. It's like a 3-hour class on Wednesday mornings. I think it's like 8 to 11.
They like to have those.
Yeah, I'm poor kids. And I know I couldn't make that one. And I'm a guest for half or 2/3 of it or so. So 2 St. John's things in 3 days. I'm a big Red Storm guy. I didn't go there, but at a lot of the basketball games, so I'm really looking forward to it. And I appreciate the invitation to Tom and the rest of you guys to have me on.
Thanks, Chris.
Thanks, Chris. And there will always be an open invitation for you to join us here in studio. We'd love to have you back on the air.
That would be my pleasure. Good luck, guys, with everything. Take care.
Thank you. That was
Bye.
Chris Botta, everybody.